Hello and welcome to Building Digital Resilience Against Ransomware. Today's webinar is sponsored by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media, and I am excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handouts section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, and I'd especially like to call your attention to a PDF on building a cyber resilience vault with Zerto. Also, in the handouts section, there are a few Actual Tech Media resources that you can check out. So I encourage you to access all the resources in there now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section as well. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Now, finally, we've got experts on this webcast, and one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask them your most pressing questions. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's get to today's fantastic content. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. We have Scott Shields, who's Global Cyber Specialist at HPE. And we have Matt Bernhardt, who's Global Solutions Engineer for Cyber at HPE. Scott and Matt, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you very much for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. So Scott, I'm going to turn things over to you. The floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So yeah, like Scott said, my name is Scott Shields, Global Cyber Specialist here at HPE. With me today is my technical vault expert, Mr. Bernhardt. We're going to pair up. We're going to go through some slides, give you a little bit of background on the solution, and kind of walk you through what this vault looks like, some of its objectives, and so on. Quick agenda, like I said, we're going to talk real quick about the ransomware landscape, right? Everybody sees it in the news every single day. More and more cyber crimes are being committed. We want to talk about that real quick, why this is maybe a little bit different from what we've seen even a couple of months ago, but especially a few years ago. And then we'll jump right into the objectives and overview of our Cyber Resilience Vault. And then lastly, we'll summarize with a little bit of a competitive marketplace review so folks understand truly what the differentiators are that we provide with our solution today. So to start off, we're going to talk about the ransomware landscape. So these first two slides, these two graphics specifically, are illustrating the fact that cyber crimes and ransomware attacks, it's global, right? I already mentioned it. We see it every single day in the news, right? Las Vegas got hit, both MGM as well as Caesar's Palace got hit recently, right? The goal, though, and the reason why we like to emphasize the fact that this is a global epidemic is the fact that no one is safe, right? Every organization, every industry, every vertical around the globe is under constant attack. Now, when we look at the top graphic here, you do notice that the US is far and away number one as far as attacks, right? Number 4 is Canada. That puts North America in the sights of every cyber criminal out there. And this is just the reality that we deal with on a regular basis. But you do notice just about every country around the globe does have these attacks happening as well. And when we look at this a little bit deeper and we start looking at the industries that are attacked on top of that, the picture becomes a little clearer on what this hierarchy really looks like. And if we look at this list, right, we've got manufacturing, we've got finance and insurance, professional business consulting services, all the way down to some of the other industries you would expect to see on a list like this, which is education, healthcare, and government as well. Now, I do like to at least highlight why we typically see manufacturing as the number one attacked industry from a cybercrime perspective. And there's two main reasons for this. Number one, manufacturing typically runs on a 24/7 schedule. What this allows is very little window for updates, right? To operating systems, to firmware, which means security vulnerabilities are in that environment longer than they should be. But on top of that, manufacturing also provides a significant amount of IoT devices in their environments. So think about additional entry points that have security vulnerabilities. It creates this kind of perfect atmosphere for these bad actors, for these threat actors to gain access and then potentially encrypt or steal data, what have you, right? Whatever their goal is for them to obviously get a check, right? That's what they're looking for. This is a business model at this point. On top of that, when we look at the threat landscape and we start to take a look at what we've seen from an increasing attack perspective, we look at Linux attacks. And traditionally, any sort of administrator loved having Linux in their environment. They moved towards it because it was seen as a very limited attack vector, right? It was the safest kind of system out there. But today, what we started to see is these bad actors focus on Linux. And the reason why is because they're not just looking at your data after a scan and trying to determine what your most important applications are or your most important data sets are. They want to ensure that their victim has no choice but to write them a check in order to de-encrypt their data. So what they're doing is they are attacking and disabling security products. They are attacking and disabling and adjusting backup windows. And they're attacking ESXi directly. So, like I said, they are getting very good, very sophisticated at their job, which again, there is no better result for these bad actors than to get a check through a ransom by ensuring that their victims have no option but to pay them the ransom in order to get these the keys to de-encrypt. And when we take a look at the average initial ransomware demand today, these numbers are a little bit dated. These are from 2021. IBM came out with some new data a couple of weeks back. The average initial ransom demand today is $4.4 million, and the top demand has blown away the $5.4 million that's listed here. Caesar's Palace was ransomed at $30 million. They ended up settling on 15, but we've seen tens of millions of dollars from a top-end ransom demand at this point. Lastly, in 2021, U.S. banks processed roughly $1.2 billion in ransomware payments. So again, the goal for the bad actors is to get paid through these ransoms. The interesting part about this number is only about 4% of the victims actually got their data and applications back in a reasonable amount of time. In other words, they paid the ransom, but they still took a very long time to get their data and applications back. Typically, what we see is north of 45 days, even with some of the competitive immutable data vaults on the market today. So when we look at the anatomy of a cyber attack, we like to show this graphic because it gives you an idea of the stages, right? And what you'll notice is there's this dwell time. And during that dwell time, the bad actors are setting up a command center. They are basically moving laterally within the environments, which allows them to scan for network devices, so additional entry points, applications, data sets, you name it, right? The important aspects of the victim's environment so that they can prioritize what they want to encrypt and what they want to hit. And you'll see at stage 4, this is where they disable security, they will disable backup, but in more cases, what they do instead of disabling backup, because it will throw alarms, it will throw notifications, what they do is they adjust the retention policies. So if your retention policy today on your backups is 7 years, they'll adjust it to 1 hour. That is devastating when you try to recover. And the older the data that you have, the worse it's going to be from a recovery perspective. Now, if you look at stage 6 is where the encryption actually happens. By this point, it's too late, right? They have you. They know that the only chance you have to recover at that point is to pay the ransom. And we take a look at the total anatomy of a cyber attack. Excuse me. And this is why when we look at some of the agencies and the institutions that focus on cybersecurity, this is why we see immutable data vaults, why we see immutability, air gapping, isolation, and decentralization of data being the top priorities to protect against this type of cybercrime and ransomware attacks. Now, when we take a look at what we see out there today, which is the competitive marketplace, right? There's immutable data vaults out there today. Just about every major backup vendor has a version of this. And they are all very good at providing immutability. They're all very good at providing air gapping, right? But where they fall down and where we saw the real opportunity in the market was recovery speeds, right? Whether that happens immediately upon infection or as soon as you're able to actually recover, this is where we saw the biggest impact that we could make, right? And we have a team here at Zerto that is out of our Canadian team. And what they did is they came over from a competitor, the market share leader, from an immutable data vault perspective, and they took a look at this and they said, look, what we can do and what we can build with the portfolio here at HPE, we can create a better solution. And that solution really focuses on Zerto's capabilities for rapid recovery. That is where Zerto sits in the data protection world today. Our focus is being able to group virtual machines and through continuous data protection, provide incredibly fast recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. And when we look at this timeline specifically, this is designed to show what the competitive marketplace looks like from a backup-based vault. And when we look at this, we see the total time to recover being 18 days. Now, this timeline is very generous. And I say that because when Matt and I first started having these conversations, we've had conversations with um, remediation teams and professional services teams that are specifically designed to come in and help victims of ransomware attacks. And when we started talking to them about what recovery times look like based upon vaulting solutions, they suggested that 18 days was very generous. And here's why. If we take a look at, let's say, the number one market share leader today, they use what is essentially a backup target appliance. And that target appliance advertises 750 gigs per hour for restore. Now, if we use the example of a 300 terabyte environment to restore, just the math works out to about 17 days to just restore the data. That doesn't include forensics and remediation, sanitizing of data, or best practices, performing a new backup, followed by recovering those applications into production. And that's the scary part. And in what we have been able to determine, the typical time frame for a 300 terabyte environment to recover from a ransomware attack with a backup based vault, it's about 35 to 45 days. What we want to do and what our goal was in the architecting of this solution was to severely reduce that recovery time. We understand that any organization out there today that doesn't have access to their top tier, their tier 0 revenue generating applications, it can be absolutely devastating to their bottom line. And in some cases, they can even go out of business due to an attack like this. So that is our goal. It's to provide all of those wonderful things that immutable data vaults offer, right? Immutability, isolation, air gapping, but also, and most importantly, get your top applications back up and running quickly so that you can continue to generate revenue for your organization. Now, I'm going to hand this off to Mr. Bernhardt. Mr. Bernhardt is going to take you through what is essentially the architecture, followed by some recovery flows. Mr. Bernhardt, are you good to go?
I am. Thank you, Scott.
You got it, buddy.
So yeah, let's talk through what the architecture looks like in our particular solution, the Cyber Resilience Vault, and I'll make sure as we're going through this to sort of refer back to that timeline Scott just showed you and give you explanations as to why and how it is we're able to be that much quicker on the recovery side of things. Because really, at the end of the day, how quickly you can recover your environment, how quickly you can get your business back online is a key metric and a key capability that we all need. So let's look at this at what we call the Cyber Vault solution, and we'll look at it from a single data center based architecture. This idea here of putting the vault components in the same data center as the production or source data you've asked us to protect is really falls under what I would call best practices that get published by NIST and Gartner and some of the others that put these out. And the primary reason they recommend the vaults go in with the production data is that we want to prepare for what I would call the worst case scenario, in that we want to be able to recover large amounts of data quickly. We want to be able to recover entire production enterprise data centers quickly. And the best way to do that is to be able to take advantage of the network speeds, the top of rack speeds, if you will, within a single data center versus having to recover back from a secondary data center across a LAN connection. Now, that being said, there are certainly cases and instances where it makes a lot of sense to put the vault in that secondary DR data center. Perhaps you want to be able to leverage this environment as protection against a more traditional DR event, like, workers cutting cables, power going down and the UPS is not kicking in, Mother Nature striking. And especially when you're going to use that DR data center as your temporary production recovery site, then there's a compelling reason to split Vault from core production data center. But for now, let's focus on the single data center and what that might look like. What you're seeing right now on the screen is what I would call a typical basic VMware environment. We have ESX hosts. They are connected to storage. We have vCenter in the environment for the overall management of the virtual machines and their hosts. And now let's layer Zerto on top of that for protection. And this is very much for those of you that have experience with Zerto in traditional use cases. This should look very familiar to you. So a Zerto environment starts with a ZVM, the Zerto Virtual Manager. The ZVM is the master, if you will, the overall manager of the Zerto environment that you have in place. It is got a number of responsibilities or features or functions, if you will. It provides the GUI that you would log on to when you wanted to access this EVM. It provides the APIs for those of you that want to use more of an automated implementation and you want to make calls into Zerto. It talks with vCenter to understand the VMs you've asked us to protect, where they are, and where their underlying storage sits. And then last but not least, it is the ZVM manages the VRAs, the virtual replication appliances. Those are the small red boxes. We put one on each ESX host. The job of the VRA is to watch for new and unique blocks of data being created on VMs that you've asked us to protect. And when we see a block, we will make a copy of it, we will compress it, and then we'll wait for the original source block to get written down to production. This format of moving data around, the staying out of the storage, really gives us some big advantages. Number one, we don't require quiescing or snapshots or anything like that at the production level. We are able to be agnostic, meaning we can protect and replicate data that's running on one set of servers and storage to a completely different set of servers and storage. So that agnostic nature comes in really important in this solution. A couple things that are new with Zerto 10. These are not unique to the Vault solution. But number one, the Zerto Virtual Manager, for those of you that have been using or know about Zerto over the years, the ZVM has traditionally been a Windows-based machine. It is now a Linux-based appliance. In fact, it's a simple OVF that's very easy to deploy, very quick to deploy, and it really narrows the exposure and attack vectors by moving to Linux. The other thing that's new to Zerto 10 is this idea of inline anomaly or ransomware detection. What is neat or cool about this in a couple of levels, especially versus our backup competitors, is number one, we are scanning the data, the blocks, within milliseconds of the source block being created. So as we're making that copy and compressing it, we're also scanning it. And you think about this versus the timing of traditional backup products, where first they complete the full backup window, and then they go and about scanning it. We're going to be able to, number one, alert you immediately when we see anomalous activity starting. And number two, we're going to be able to tell you immediately what is a good recovery point and what is not. And with Zerto, when we replicate to a secondary location, it goes into a journal, and the journal gives us recovery points of every 5 to 10 seconds. And with those recovery points now, we are going to make a notation that says, yes, this is a clean recovery point, or no, this may have some active ransomware in it, for example. So those are all new to Zerto 10 that come with the product. They're not unique to the Vault solution, and they're there for you to use now as part of the Zerto 10 platform. So back to the Vault. We're going to use, again, as I said, Zerto replication, block-based continuous replication to get the data into the landing zone. And then it'll go on down to the VRM and ZVM and VRAs, where it goes into that journal. Our journal is like a DVR for recovery. You get recovery points of every 5 to 10 seconds, going back as much as 30 days before that data then gets written down permanently to what we call the recovery disk, where we are constantly building out the VMs to help shorten recovery times. Something that you would not have seen before, that for those that are familiar with Zerto, is this ability with our Vault solution to protect physical workloads. So we have found, as we talk with people, that there are still some physical workloads out there that need to be vaulted. More often than not, they are database servers. And we can actually now, unlike traditional Zerto, which is focused on virtual workloads, with our Vault solution, we can actually protect physical workloads. And let me kind of take you through a scenario here. So with, let's say, a Oracle server, physical Oracle server, what we can do is assign a LUN from that storage device you see in the landing zone at the top to the physical server, and then have the DBAs do RMAN dumps or RMAN backups and point them to that LUN we've assigned. And now it'll be written directly to the storage device in the landing zone. And so when we go ahead and do our periodic replication between the landing zone and the Vault, we will send that data in. So now if I've talked through the flow, we've got the data to the landing zone, either through Zerto on virtual machines or mapping in a drive for the physical. What we're going to do next is, on a periodic basis, typically I see every 4 to 6 hours, but it's completely customizable by the admin team. The Alletra storage device in the landing zone is going to establish a connection with the Alletra storage device in the Vault. They do this across the replication ports. It's a temporary basis, and while they're connected, we will use storage replication to get that data from the landing zone Alletra to the Vault Alletra. Again, using replication only ports, so we don't have to worry about the bad actors or the hackers coming through that connection and into the Vault and creating havoc, or active ransomware going through there and impacting our Vault environment in a negative way. So that's how we get the data to the Vault. And the last thing I want to mention here is we have HPE InfoSight, as you see that yellow circle down there. This is yet another layer of detection that we add to this solution. InfoSight, what it does is pattern-based detection on the storage device, looking for anomalies or changes to how data had been previously. And so these are just a couple of layers between Zerto 10 and InfoSight, where we're layering on additional protection on top of what you've already invested on, in all likelihood, as part of your broader cyber protection stance. And so we've got a number of ways to sort of help report and alert on what's going on beyond what you've already implemented or are planning to implement. If we look in the Vault, you're going to see, in addition to the Alletra that I mentioned, you're going to see a set of HPE servers. You're going to see a jump box. It's important in the solution that we put together, which, by the way, our Vault solution includes all the hardware and software you see in the Vault in the landing zone. It includes what we call a white glove end-to-end implementation and training, and it includes either 3 or 5 year support, depending on which one it is you prefer. And it's really important that we stick to these hardware products, because it enables us in the recovery process, which I'll explain here shortly, to do what we do in such a quick manner. But at this point, what you can see also is this vault is intended or capable of being what we call a clean room. So if you want to do forensics analysis afterwards, the isolated, bubbled, protected vault, everything in a read-only state, is a perfect spot to do your remediation and forensics. It's also a great place to do validation, testing, and training on how to recover from a cyber attack. Because again, completely isolated means you can do it any time of the day, any day of the week, and not impact your production environment. And I'm going to stop here for just a quick second and ask Scott and Scott if there are any relevant questions that you've seen at this point, or Scott Shields, any points you wanted to make before I move on?
No, I think we're good. I've answered at least one of them that I think was at least something that we can respond to. There is one from Richard. Richard, we may respond to that one privately, but I think we're good to go for right now, Matt.
Great, thank you. So that's how the data gets there. That is what the infrastructure looks like. We also have the ability with the solution to have a secondary data DR center and use Zerto to functionality called one-to-many. And with the idea of one-to-many, we can replicate data from production to two different locations. So we can have one copy go to the landing zone for cyber protection and one copy go to the DR data center for that geographical protection, if you will. And again, this is what we would architect or design as part of a single data center vault solution. The other thing I want to mention before moving on is we have the ability to protect cloud-based workloads, whether they're running natively in Azure or AWS, or they're running on Google, VMware as a service in AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. We simply replicate them using our product to the landing zone, and then with our periodic storage replication into the vault, we make sure the data gets in there. So that's how we get the data in there. That's how we get things set up. We have at this point, once we've got the data in and severed that air gap connection, we have that immutable copy that we've made through storage snapshots. We have it in a truly air gapped environment. And quite frankly, we are ready now should a recovery need come along. And it has to do with how we're moving and what we're moving. And I'll show that on the next set of slides, what the recovery flow looks like. So let's go through one of the ways we would do the recovery. There are a number of ways. That's also not only is this a very flexible architecture in terms of where you put it and how you size it and the number of workloads we can protect, it's also very flexible in the way you can do recovery. So let's look at the architecture a little bit differently here in this slide. Cleaned it up a bit, got some of the details out. It's just easier to talk through what recovery involves. But here what you're seeing is, again, an example of what you saw on the last slide. We have a production environment, right? Zerto, vCenter, ZVMs, VRAs. We are replicating to the landing zone where there is another vCenter, ZVM, and VRAs. That's represented in the red dotted line. And then the black dashed line across the bottom towards the right is where we do our periodic storage replication and creation of the snapshots. So what you're looking at now is what I call a sort of day-to-day activities. There's no ransomware event taking place. There's no testing taking place. We're just continuing to replicate the change data throughout the day and night. So let's take a scenario where the ransomware got injected into the production environment, and then the hackers were particularly patient, and they decided to wait, let's say 30 to 45 days before they activated it. And during that time, they went ahead and made sure that the payload got replicated everywhere. It's in the landing zone. It's in the vault. It's on your backups. It's on your cloud copies. It's everywhere. So how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to recover in a timely manner that we keep talking about? And what do the steps look like? So it's really a two-phase process. In the first phase, we're getting the data ready to be used for recovery. So let's go ahead and sever that connection between the landing zone and the vault so the replication stops. It's not that replicating active payload into the vault can do any damage for a couple of reasons. The data in the vault is read-only. The data in the vault has no access. The payload in the vault has no access to compute, which it needs to create havoc. And then lastly, with that replication only port connection between the Electras, the command and control that the hackers have established in your production environment can't get through there and activate anything. So it's not that we're worried about damaging the vault. If we can sever the connection and keep that active payload from getting in there, it's just less that we have to clean. So that's why we sever the connection. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select a snapshot that we want to recover from. Again, as I mentioned, we're assuming that that payload is in virtually all the snapshots at this point, certainly going back 30, 45 days. So let's select the snapshot that is the most recent, and then we'll go through the process of cleaning it. One thing that's important to understand here that really gives us our first and biggest advantage over backup-based vault solutions is that we are replicating, when we do the storage replication from landing zone to vault, we are replicating the ESX file system of the vault. I'm sorry, of the landing zone. We are replicating the VRA and the ZVMs that belong to Zerto, along with its journal and its recovery disks. We're replicating vCenter. We're replicating any VMs that are running. Those are all being replicated into the vault through the storage replication in their native VMware format. And that's important because by doing that, when we select our snapshot and then we go ahead and make a read-write clone of what it is that we want to recover, ultimately recover with, we have this VMFS file system that we can natively scan using the tools that you've already invested in and been trained up on, or if you're lacking in those tools, we can help you in selecting a potential vendor that can provide this offering. But we've been able to do this without having to go through a recovery, a restore of any data. And if you remember back to Scott's timeline slide, that process of restore and then hoping that it's a clean restore can take days to a week or more. So what we've done, what they take, a week or roughly a week to complete, we've done in a matter of hours. And so now that we've got that data clean, we're ready to move on to the next step, which is the actual recovery. So let's take an example of a recovery option. So in this example, I am going to go and use the landing zone as my staging area. And I'm going to use it to initially recover a few apps at a time before I migrate them back to production, wherever production is, original production, temporary production at a DR site, wherever that is. I'm going to follow the same process. I can actually use the vault as the staging area as well if I needed to, because the landing zone was damaged or not ready or what have you. Because if you remember back where I said from a hardware perspective, the servers in the landing zone are identical with the vault servers. So now this process I'm going to take you through, I can do in either spot. But from a best practices perspective, using the landing zone keeps the vault completely isolated, clean, and pristine should we need it in a hurry. Maybe we thought we cleaned everything, or the ransomware or the hackers were still in somehow and they managed to encrypt again. We can go back to the vault quickly and get that clean copy that we already created. So we're going to go ahead and use the landing zone for recovery. We're going to first reestablish connection between the storage devices in the vault in the landing zone. This time, data is going to flow from the vault to the landing zone. We're going to take those clean clones and we are going to migrate them or move them over, replicate them over, if you will, to the landing zone. And remember, again, these clones are the ESX file system of the ESX hosts that we have in there. We've rebuilt them to be identical to how they were at the time these snapshots were created. So we've got them over there. The next thing we're going to do is simply assign those volumes to the hosts in the landing zone. Then we're going to just turn on vCenter, the ZVM, and the VRAs. And this will all take about 30 to 60 minutes while everything gets in sync with each other and they all recognize they're back online and they do a quick high five. And now we're ready to start recovering the applications. So again, which in that timeline takes a couple of weeks to get to the point of recovering applications, we've gotten to in a day, day and a half, depending on how long that cleaning activity took. So we recover the first couple apps, right? We've looked in our run book, our playbook, and we know these are the top of the top tier apps, and we're going to recover those first. We will then ask the app owner to come in or an admin to come in and log in, verify the apps are running the way they're supposed to at the point in time we want them to be. They bless them, and once we've got their blessing, we'll simply use Zerto to migrate the applications back to the production infrastructure. And so at this point now, we are running our first set of applications back in production, ready for the customers, internal and external. Business is back in business, and then we continue replicating, recovering and replicating those few apps at a time until we get everything back. So that's what recovery looks like. Again, I want to stress no restoration of data necessary, no restore from backups, no restore from backup storage, which we all know is built to receive data, but not really built to recover in a fast manner. Um, just a lot of advantages to this solution. So at this point, I'm going to stop again, take a breath, ask Scott and Scott if we have any questions that they can see, give folks a chance maybe to throw a question in, and see where we are at this point. Any questions, folks?
Nope, we've still got the same ones that we had before that Scott referred to. So, yep,
Okay.
we're in good shape.
Perfect. Thanks. I shall move on then. And Mr. Shields, I will hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. Great job. Um, I want to stress again that, when we took a look at what was available within the competitive market, right? Our goal and everything that Matt just kind of went through, the primary focus for us is to do all those great things that immutable data vaults do to protect against the threat actors today, right? Which again is immutability, isolation, air gapping. And what our primary goal was when we leverage Zerto is the very fast recovery times. So when we look at this solution summary view, what you're able to see is what we see today as the market leader for immutable data vaults, followed by just about every major backup solution on the market today is going to offer some level of an immutable data vault, right? They all have their own RPOs and RTOs and then total ransomware impact, right? Our goal, our primary differentiator revolves around those recovery times. So what you'll see is the last good copy or the recovery point objective for our solution is 4 hours. Now that 4 hours for RPO purposes adjusts based on two factors. How long ago the air gap connected to do the SAN to SAN replication, and how often you as the customer have dictated that replication is designed to happen or that air gapping connection is happening. So keep that in mind. 4 hours is worst case scenario if that is your schedule. RTO revolves around bringing up that environment in order to do the restores, so about 2 hours. So total ransomware impact is designed at worst to be about 6 hours. And that again is based upon a 300 VM, 300 terabyte environment that we are protecting. So again, to reiterate, from a competitive solution, from a competitive marketplace, we want to do all those great things Immutable Data Vaults do, but do the restores quicker. That is our differentiator. I want to ensure that everybody here, if there are follow-up questions, if you would like to do a deeper dive, Matt and I are available. Please reach out through the interface here where we can set up a follow-up. We are happy to go into this much deeper and really have a technical deep dive for anybody interested. If there's no further questions, Scott, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, Scott, we did get a couple of questions actually here in this last portion. The first one, they're asking, where's the landing zone and vault located?
Yeah, so I'll tackle that one real quick. Interestingly enough, and I think Matt may have mentioned this briefly, but from a best practices, when we look at some of the agencies and institutions, and from our unique differentiator, we want to bring your applications back very quickly, right? So the plan and the goal of the Cyber Resilience Vault isn't to protect against natural disasters, right? Power outages and things like that. That is traditional disaster recovery. What we are protecting against is that cyber criminal, right? The cyber threat, the ransomware attack. So both the landing zone and the vault itself should be side by side with your production environment, right? We are air gapping, we are isolated so that there is no connection to the production environment. But again, the goal is we can restore at LAN speeds, not WAN speeds.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Yeah. Another question that's come in. Can you recover to the cloud?
Matt, I'll give you that one. So yeah, the technical answer is yes, we can recover to the cloud. The thing to keep in mind, and this is not a specific challenge to this solution, but with any solution, right? There are considerations like the WAN speed Scott just mentioned up to the cloud. What kind of connection do you have? What kind of subscription and set of accounts do you have in terms of what you're using for disk types? Faster disk, slower disk, right? It's a real cost benefit with anything, but especially with the cloud. But the short answer is yes, we absolutely can.
Okay. And there's actually a follow-up question there from Jeffrey, who's wondering, can recovery from the cloud be just the delta?
Can recovery from the cloud be just a delta? So at this point, we are assuming. So the answer is yes. If you've been able to identify that your ransomware event was isolated and you were able to stop it from proliferating quickly, and so you only need to recover maybe a server, maybe a directory, maybe just a file, then you absolutely can do that. We have designed this solution to be able to recover anywhere from a single file to a folder, a drive, to VM, all the way up to an entire data center. So yeah, you can run the gamut in recovery.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And before we get into the next couple of questions that have come in here, I do want to put up a poll question here just about what additional information you'd like about the Zerto solution. And you can see all the options there. You can pick out as many as you want if you're interested in more than one thing there. Next question here. What happens if the payload gets into the vault?
So if the payload gets into the vault, And as a matter of fact, in the example I gave, the payload getting into the vault is a pretty likely scenario when you get the more patient, might I say, seasoned hackers. When you look at these stories, like with MGM and Caesars, they got hit, in a big way. That payload is getting replicated everywhere, and that would include into the vault. We have taken precautions in our design to prevent the ransomware getting in the vault to create any havoc in the vault. First thing is, when, like we said, when we do the data movement, everything in there is immutable. So immutable means you can't write to it. So that data in there is protected in that respect. The other thing is the compute is not associated to any storage in the vault until you actually physically go and do it. And with that in mind, then this payload, should it go active, can't take advantage of what it needs in terms of compute to actually do something bad. So that's number two. And then the last thing is the payload, when it goes active, typically needs a mothership, a command and control center, or somebody that gives it instructions. And by isolating the vault entirely the way we do, that also makes it impossible for it. I shouldn't say impossible. Makes it very, very difficult for it to ever cause any havoc in that manner.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And we've got time probably for one more. We've got a question here. Can we recover into the landing zone?
So absolutely, we can use the landing zone as your temporary production if you like, right? You could, while you're, excuse me, waiting for production to be back, original production or what have you, to be fully back online, you can use the landing zone. The caveat here, the way we designed this is we didn't design this for the landing zone to be production. And we did that intentionally because we wanted to keep the price under control. We didn't want to have to add a whole lot of extra servers to run production should it come to that. That being said, we have very much a modular solution, and it's very easy to add the compute to it. So if you wanted the landing zone to run your production while you got original production ready to go again, yeah, the solution can absolutely do that.
Okay. All right. Super. Well, that's probably about it on time. Scott and Matt, thank you both for putting together a really informative presentation for us and for all your insights here in the Q&A. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
We appreciated the chance to do this. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Well, and thanks to everybody who filled out the poll. And before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business, and that is the $250 Amazon gift card drawing. And the winner is Ginger Jones from North Carolina. So congratulations to Ginger Jones. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Hewlett Packard Enterprise, as well as Matt Bernhardt and Scott Shields for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.